She kicked my planter 3 times. The third time, she didn't walk away. The third time, she left in an ambulance. I watched from my porch, said nothing, did nothing. Before we start, please type ready for the story in the comments. It honestly helps me keep making these videos for you. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button. It really means the world to me. Let me tell you exactly what happened. It started on a Thursday. I remember it was Thursday because I had just gotten back from picking up groceries. And I was in that particular kind of exhausted where you don't want to talk to anyone or think about anything and just want to unload the bags and sit down. I pulled into my driveway, grabbed my bags, and that's when I saw it. A bright orange flyer tucked under my front door, not in the mailbox under the door, like she hand-delivered it personally, which, as I would later find out, she absolutely did. I stood there in my driveway with a gallon of milk in one hand and a bag of apples in the other, and read the words HOA violation notice in bold at the top. And my first reaction, honestly, was confusion because I had just done a walkthrough of my property the previous week. Everything was trimmed, clean, compliant. My lawn was cut. My fence was within regulations. My gutters were clear. So what in the world could this possibly be about? I set the groceries down on the porch and read the full notice. And when I got to the violation description, I actually laughed out loud standing there alone on my porch. I laughed because the violation listed was, and I am quoting directly here, decorative structure encroaching on shared visual space and disrupting neighborhood aesthetic cohesion. Decorative structure. You want to know what decorative structure they were talking about? A planter roughly the size of a medium dog, sitting on the left corner of my front lawn, about 4 feet from the sidewalk, completely on my property, holding a small ornamental tree I had bought at a garden center. That was it. That was the violation. Now here's the first thing you need to understand about this planter. I didn't buy it on a whim. When I moved into this neighborhood, I did my homework. I read the HOA bylaws, all 47 pages of them, which, yes, is as terrible as it sounds, and I made sure everything I added to my property was within code. The planter was within the allowed dimensions. It was within the setback requirements. It was the approved material. It wasn't painted any color on the restricted list. It was by every single metric the HOA had established completely and totally fine. So when I read this violation notice, I wasn't panicked. I was annoyed. Someone had filed a complaint over something that wasn't a violation. And I had a pretty good idea who Karen, who lived directly across the street from me, not next door across the street, which means she had a perfect, unobstructed view of my front lawn from her living room window. I had seen her standing at that window before, arms crossed, watching. I'd assumed she was just one of those people, you know the type, who watches the neighborhood notes, who's parking where mentally catalogs the comings and goings. I'd chalked it up to boredom. But this violation notice made it very clear that Karen wasn't just watching, she was evaluating. And at some point my planter had failed her evaluation. I told myself it was just a bad day for her. I actually said that out loud to myself standing on my porch. She's just having a bad day. I want to go back and shake myself because I had no idea what I was dealing with yet. No idea at all. I decided not to move the planter, obviously, because I didn't have to. Instead, I sat down that evening and sent a polite, thorough email to the HOA board explaining that the planter was fully compliant, attaching the relevant bylaw sections, and respectfully requesting that the violation notice be reviewed and rescinded. I was calm. I was professional. I was, and I say this with full confidence, completely reasonable. And here's where things got a little strange because the board responded within 24 hours, which almost never happens. And the response wasn't, "You're right. We'll look into it." The response was a second warning letter. Not a formal citation yet, just another warning, but still a second warning when the first one shouldn't have existed. And buried at the bottom of that email was one line that stopped me cold. It said, and again I'm paraphrasing, the complaint was submitted by a resident with documented concerns about visual corridor integrity in the cul-de-sac area. Visual corridor integrity. I had to read that 3 times. Someone had submitted a formal complaint using those exact words. And whoever wrote that complaint knew enough HOA language to make it sound technical. That wasn't a neighbor venting. That was someone who had done research, someone who had prepared. I closed my laptop and sat there for a minute thinking about that. And I had this feeling, this low, quiet feeling in my stomach that this wasn't going to end with an email chain. I was right, but not in the way I expected. Because 2 days later, I wasn't at home when it happened. I was in my backyard doing some basic maintenance. Had my earbuds in, wasn't paying attention to the front of the house. And when I came inside about an hour later, I noticed something looked off through my front window. I walked to the door, opened it, looked out at my lawn, and immediately my stomach dropped. The planter was on its side. The small ornamental tree was half out of the soil. Roots exposed, leaves bent, and there was a crack running along the base of the planter, a real crack. Something had hit this thing hard. I stood there staring at it for a second, and then I did what any reasonable person does in this situation. I went and checked my security camera. I had installed a doorbell camera about 8 months prior, mostly because a package had gone missing and my wife had suggested it. I'd finally gotten around to setting it up. Best decision I ever made. Because what that camera had recorded in full high definition at 2:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday was Karen walking across the street, stepping onto my lawn without hesitation, looking left, then right. And then really picture this, she wound up like she was trying out for a field goal competition and kicked my planter hard with her right foot. It rocked. She looked at it and then she walked back across the street, went inside and closed her door like nothing happened, like she had just checked the mail. I watched the footage 3 times. My mouth was open the whole time. She had walked onto my private property and physically damaged my belongings. And here is the part that is going to make you question everything about what comes next. I didn't call the police. I didn't confront her. I didn't even post about it. I just sat with it. I saved the footage. I backed it up in 2 places, and then I went outside, carefully righted the planter, checked the damage, and told myself, and here it comes again, the line I am now deeply embarrassed by. I told myself it was just a bad day for her. But this time, I said it differently. Not with sympathy, with something else. With that particular kind of calm that you only feel when you've decided on some level that you're going to let someone keep going until they give you everything you need. Now, I need to pause here for a second because I want you to understand something about Karen before we go any further. Karen wasn't just some random difficult neighbor. Karen was by this point a fixture of the HOA board meetings. She didn't have an official role. She wasn't a board member, wasn't an officer, but she showed up to every single meeting and she talked a lot. She had opinions on everything: lawn height, holiday decorations, what kind of trash cans were acceptable at the curb. She had once, according to my neighbor Mike, who had lived here much longer than me, convinced the board to send a warning letter to a family because their welcome mat was, quote, visually inconsistent with the neighborhood standard. A welcome mat, so Karen wasn't operating on a whim here. Karen had a track record. And the fact that the board had sent that second warning letter so quickly without even verifying the complaint told me that Karen had influence, real influence. And that made the footage I was sitting on feel even more important because at some point I was going to need it. I just didn't know how badly yet, and I really had no idea what was about to happen next. Because about a week later, things escalated in a way I absolutely did not see coming. To be continued?
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.